Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Magnetic Masculinity Podcast, where we provide men with practical tools and strategies to bridge the gap between achievement and fulfillment so that they can live their most magnetic lives. Today, we're talking about vehicle of consciousness. So we're now all done with the authentic alignment, and we're moving into vehicle of consciousness from the magnetic masculinity blueprint. And before we go more into talking about the topic of the day, which is the brain or software from the vehicle of consciousness, can you talk a bit more on where does vehicle of consciousness fit in and what's the role of it when it comes to magnetic masculinity?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And welcome to everybody listening. So the magnetic masculinity blueprint is sort of a blueprint for human success, or what people might call enlightenment, or your most fulfilling, magnetic, amazing life. And I've spent years breaking this down and working with clients all over the world to create this blueprint. So when people ask, how do I achieve magnetic masculinity? The two overlying metaphorical concepts that we work with that help us quickly experience sustainable results are authentic alignment, which we've been talking about, and successfully piloting what I call your vehicle of consciousness. So just for a refresh, your vehicle of consciousness that you are living in right now, a lot of modern physics is showing us that consciousness is fundamental, energy never dies. So there's a couple of different metaphors we can use to look at this. One of them is that you are a computer and you are connected to an outlet in the wall. You need electricity. So you need energy. So this body is the computer, and the electricity is your consciousness, your soul, your energy that's animating or that is electrifying that computer. And some of us are connected to the World Wide Web. We all have the capacity to connect to the World Wide Web that the spiritualists would call the Akashic Records and the physicists might call the database or the ether. So understanding how that works, but then from that concept, you are the electricity that is inhabiting something. This is your vehicle of consciousness. So I like to use metaphors that are relatable, and I really like cars. I've always really loved cars. So I call this your vehicle of consciousness. And it helps us very easily diagnose and repair when something is going wrong if we can break things into systems that help our brain understand it. So in your vehicle of consciousness that you are currently inhabiting, your body, your brain is the computer. So the computer runs all of the different systems. They're all dependent on the computer software in your vehicle, in your car. And it might have really good software or it might have really outdated software. And if the computer is running perfectly, we also need an engine. And that engine has to have proper maintenance or it'll break down sooner. It needs to have a full tank of gas, or optimally it has a full tank of gas. And we don't want to I like to drive nice sports cars, and I don't put low octane fuel in my sports cars. I like to put 93, 94, 92, 91 octane fuel into that gas tank. And I keep all the fluids and high quality fluids in that engine so that it doesn't overheat, it doesn't burn out. But even if the computer software is running really well, and you've got a full tank of gas and the engine is well maintained, you need a battery. And the battery is well, depending on whether we're talking electric cars or not, but I'm talking old fashioned. So your heart is the battery. And that's where a lot of men have not learned how to charge that battery and keep that battery charged so that it fuels all of this whole system. And emotions are your navigation system. And emotions help guide you towards your authentic alignment or inform you when you're off course. They also guide us with more clarity to our authentic wants, needs, boundaries, and values. And as we talk about with emotions in men, any emotion energy in motion that is not allowed to be in motion, is allowed to run through that system, it gets stuck and it causes damage to the engine. Or like I often say, it's like having a beach ball inflated with air, and you're trying to push that beach ball underwater. You've got hundreds of beach balls pushed underwater. So that system is costing a lot of energy because it requires a lot of energy to hold energy back. So we want to clear out those beach balls so that we can get some energy to get that emotional navigation system back online. So we want all of those systems to be running optimally in order for us to experience our most magnetic life. And today we're going to talk a little bit about that software, the brain, and look at how we can find practical ways to reprogram, optimize, make sure there's not too many tabs open on that computer, make sure that the software is up to date, and that we know how to remove any software that no longer serves us.
So can you explain about when it comes to the brain as a software, how can men listening identify whether they have good software or bad software?
Well, if you are living your best life and you feel a lot of happiness and pleasure and compassion, and everybody around you agrees with you, because we also want to be self-aware. Some people I definitely meet that I work with, and I don't mind this, but are like, no, everything's great. I'm amazing. I'm awesome. I'm not the problem. And everybody else in their life is like, that guy's a disaster. Or, their wives and their children feel disconnected from their employees are terrified of them. Or so we want to make sure that we feel great, but that other people can maybe experience us the way we experience ourselves without only caring on what other people think. It's a fine line, I think. And I think that it's fair to make an assumption that software could always use a little upgrade. We always want to make sure that we're just sort of like, maybe we want to insert some new software that would be really awesome, that would make the system run even more efficiently if you think it's already crushing it. And I think that because we're living in the emotional dark ages, and we've deprived a lot of people and a lot of men from the ability to feel fully authentic, I would say it's a fair assumption that there might be some suboptimal software. It's often said in self-help and psychology and neuroscience that 90 to 95% of our perceptual awareness, the thoughts we think, the behaviors we choose, the habits we create, and the patterns we experience are based on subconscious software, typically from before the age of 7 years old. So you might look at it and go, actually, this software is amazing. Great. That's perfect. But wouldn't it be more empowering to understand how to become the programmer of that software? I often say to people, either you train your brain or your brain is training you. And the brain has, I'm going to grossly oversimplify neuroscience just for the sake of easy metaphorical alignment, but 3 of the functions of your brain are to seek pleasure, often in ways that are not in our highest good for the quality of maintenance in our body, our engine. So sometimes we seek pleasure through, I love fats, like really fatty foods, or really salty foods, or really highly addictive foods that food scientists have made sure have the exact right amount of everything, so that every time you eat it, you instantly get addicted to it, but it might over time cause corrosion to your body and even into your brain, and function and impact the way the electricity can run in your brain if we're not getting enough nutrients and things that the brain needs. So it might seek pleasure in repeating old patterns from childhood. Again, those patterns, it might seek pleasure through things that are not actually in our highest good. It tries to avoid pain, which can be very helpful. And also seeking pleasure is helpful too. We should seek joy. We're here to have fun on this planet. So, but again, it's a fine line. It's a balance. finding healthy ways to meet those needs. And it wants to avoid pain, which can be great because it would help us like not be in an abusive relationship or run from a bear or whatever we need to do to avoid pain. But that also means that it might help us avoid the perceived discomfort of growth and expansion by trying to keep us the same, or avoid the discomfort of breaking habits and things like that. And the other thing it does is it tries to run what is familiar to it. Electricity, same as electricity in your house, is going to take the path of least resistance. So if you have a nice firm neural pathway there, the electricity in your brain is going to want to take that neural pathway that it already sees, which again might be great, but you should get to decide if that's a helpful neural pathway for you to have or not. So either you train your brain or your brain is training you. And I think it's more empowering for us to learn how to train our brain, not in a way of forcing ourselves to do things, but more from a healthy place of programming, training, and just understanding how our brain and our mind and our thoughts and our programming works and how to keep the brain healthy.
So with this, what is it that the computer or the software is consisting of? Like, is it thoughts or is it like beliefs? Like, what is it that it's actually consisting of, or what's the kind of the way that it works so that people listening can understand or at least identify it within themselves?
Well, again, this is probably a conversation we could ask 50 experts and get 50 great suggestions and pieces of advice, but we'll look at some and see what is helpful. So the thoughts that we think over and over become beliefs or neural pathways. Beliefs become perceptual filters, and the brain, the left brain, will always find evidence of what it believes, which is how blind spots work. So for instance, if you think a thought in childhood like, nobody likes me, nobody likes me, nobody likes me, nobody likes me, eventually that's going to wire in your brain and it's going to become a belief and it's going to become a perceptual filter. So anything that you experience in your external reality has to come through these perceptual filters. You might know the expression rose-colored glasses, yes?
Yep.
So this could be like poop-colored glasses in some cases, and you might have 10 or 15 layers of coating on these glasses or these perceptual filters, how you see reality. So if you have a belief that nobody likes you, your brain will actually delete information or will not focus on any information of people liking you. So people might be genuinely liking you and trying to show you they like you, but the brain will twist around one little piece of information to justify its belief and be like, see, proof. So again, you're going to be looking at everything through that lens or through that software of I'm not good enough. Nobody likes me. Nobody appreciates me. The world is a hard place. It's too hard to make money. Greedy people never get far, or bleeding hearts, kind people always, the nice guy finishes last, or whatever these thoughts and beliefs are that we were exposed to in childhood are going to determine how we perceive reality. And now the brain very much has a feedback loop with the emotional navigation system. So sometimes we do mindset work, and I love mindset work, and I love the power of thought. I find it one of the easiest and most simple ways to change my reality. And I also believe in somatic work and letting things out of our body if we've got stuck cells. But a lot of what we experience are based on thoughts. And for instance, I do a corporate presentation. It's one of my favorite workshops to do, is teaching people how to take stress level from a 400 to a 40 instantly using the power of thought. So for instance, let's look at a case study that I use with a really great guy that I worked with who owned a lot of commercial buildings and companies. And in childhood, he developed thoughts that he wasn't good enough, he was unworthy, that nobody appreciated him, nobody met his emotional needs, so he wasn't aware he really had them, and he was constantly afraid of failure because his parents wanted him to be the best and be the best and be the richest and be the smartest, and he was very smart and he was very wealthy, but he was having trouble selling a particular building. So it was tying up millions in capital and costing him tens of thousands of dollars, burning through tens of thousands of dollars a month, and it wasn't selling. So when he came to me, he was drinking too much. He was arguing with his family. He was shutting down. He felt disconnected. He had hypertension, a sore back. He wasn't sleeping. He was really getting quite angry. He was being a bit verbally unkind or verbally abusive to his employees. And the first thing I did was I asked him to start to practice metacognition, which is the observation or awareness of our thoughts and actions. So it brings us into the observer or the writer and director of our movie rather than the actor. And he kind of thought that was dumb. He was like, what are you talking about? You're supposed to be really good at this. What are you talking about? It's not my thoughts. It's millions of dollars. And I was like, just please do it. And I won't charge you if this doesn't work. So he came back to me the next week. And because he had beliefs like, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, I'm a loser, I'll never be good enough, this is the narrative that was playing in his mind. He said probably 200 to 400 times a day, he was thinking, this is a nightmare, or this is an effing nightmare. I'm ruined. I'm going to be broke. I have let my family down. I'm alone in this. I'm not good enough, but mostly it was, this is a nightmare. I'm ruined. Well, think in your body how your emotional navigation system reacts to this is a nightmare. Your brain believes you. Your brain doesn't know. Your brain says, oh gosh, this is a nightmare? Terrifying. Okay, let's put 2 parts cortisol, 1 part adrenaline, and flood the body, send that into the body, tell the nervous system this or that. So it becomes this feedback loop. And if we really looked at those things, were any of them true? So yes, having millions of capital tied up and hundreds of thousands of dollars maybe, being prevented or being spent every month is very stressful. Let's call that 40 units of stress. But so much energy was going to thoughts like, I'm ruined. I failed my family. I'm going to be broke. I'm such a loser. This is a nightmare. But again, if you're just playing those thoughts over and over and your body's reacting as if those thoughts are true, and then your body is reacting and generating more thoughts and around and around and around you go, you're not going to have any energy for creative problem solving. And you don't necessarily want to go from 0 to hero and be like, everything's perfect, this is awesome, and kind of gaslight yourself. So what we started doing was finding thoughts like, this is really stressful, so I deserve a little extra self-care. I am amazing to have created enough money to spend millions of dollars. I've created millions of dollars before. Maybe I will again. When this building sells, wouldn't it be fun to take my family on a cruise around the world? Wouldn't it be fun if somebody bought this building and was able to start their dream career here? And then if we look at like manifestation or law of attraction, actually, I'm sure you can guess that he sold the building fairly quickly after this. But just thinking how it reduces the stress on our body and in that engine, in the vehicle of consciousness, if the software that's running isn't just always finding evidence of its lousy beliefs and letting thoughts run wild and create momentum and momentum and momentum that are creating more physical stress in our body, when we can start to manage those thoughts. It's not about controlling our thoughts and controlling our minds. Thoughts happen. It's about looking at them, questioning them, allowing them, and then finding different thoughts that are equally true that are going to lower our stress without bypassing or gaslighting or invalidating ourselves, but just being a little more conscientious and understanding that a lot of that software that's running is not who you are. It's not your fault. It was installed in your hard drive or installed in your operating system in your hard drive. All of this software was installed before the age of 7. So it's not your fault, but it is your problem. And if we don't learn to train the brain and master the mind and get the brain not to be addicted to negative feedback loops and not to want to avoid the discomfort of looking at our blind spots, so we start to, like you and I have talked about a lot, and we'll talk about in a future episode, eating our shit sandwiches. How we actually level up in this game in our vehicle of consciousness is by looking at the parts in our life that aren't working without making them mean we're not good enough and shame collapsing. But we can train our brain, and over time we can change those perceptual filters so that there's a more compassionate internal dialogue, more energy freed up so that we can connect more to the World Wide Web, our intuition, and get more accurate information instead of getting stuck in the limiting software and thoughts that are stuck in our head, that are just running on old software loops, instead of expanding and connecting to the amazing information available to us in the World Wide Web when we're online and that vehicle of consciousness is running super effectively. When that multidimensional vehicle of consciousness is running effectively, you get an automatic connection to the World Wide Web. A lot of people try to get that connection through meditation, ayahuasca, whatever means that they can. But when all of our systems are running effectively, we do have access to more information, and then we're not as stuck in these thought loops. But that involves training the brain and starting to become aware of what software no longer serves us. So if you have, say, a thought you think over and over, like it's okay to make mistakes, I'm a good person, think of having that perceptual filter when you're navigating work versus I have to be the best, nobody likes me. So if you want your brain to find evidence of its beliefs, let's have that. But again, we want that to be in a healthy way. The suboptimal part of that would be as if our conditioned self is having thoughts, or the ego, which we're not shaming the ego, is having beliefs like, I'm not the problem, I'm amazing, I'm the best, everybody else is the problem. So again, it can be helpful to have somebody we really trust reflect to us how helpful our perceptual filters are. Because again, everything can be helpful or unhelpful. Everything can be in the shadow or the light, or, like we've talked about it, everything is a spectrum. So we can also, that software can also protect us, like in the case of, say, narcissism or something, where it's like, it's so trying to avoid the discomfort of shame or pain or looking at themselves as not good enough, because that software was so deeply painful that it creates an overlay program of I am the best, I am good enough, I am better than everybody, I don't make mistakes. And that almost becomes, and then that becomes the overlay software to protect the deep embedded software of not good enough. So we do also want to practice self-awareness. That was a lot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I have a question about the software in, so like have you ever experienced with men that you have worked with that, like what if software itself, so there's like two-part question. What are some of the ways, before we get into even like reprogramming or some tools that can be used, what are some of the things that are getting in the way of even doing it? And have you experienced it where the software itself is kind of getting in a way of reprogramming, where it's like, I don't need any reprogramming, or it's like kind of like getting in a way or resisting it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, because we have, again, I don't love the concept of the ego, because the ego itself is like, I don't want to have an ego. So as soon as we hear that word that we know, the ego's like, well, I don't have an ego, or or if we're self-deprecating, we're like, yeah, I have a terrible ego. So but I'm going to use the word ego because it'd be quicker than creating a different metaphorical alignment with our listeners. That's why we also want to practice self-compassion, and why we want to start with self-compassion, so that we're not going to shame collapse. We're treating everything as information and software. But that's why you and I first worked on self-compassion, eating our shit sandwiches, self-awareness, and things like that, because the reason I work with people in that specific order is that is going to create a more hospitable environment for us to be curious. And also, remember we talked about, so for blind spots, if we understand that that's how we level up, and I'm training your brain for you, helping you train your brain at the beginning until I teach people this is what I'm doing, is I'm rewarding you every time you eat a shit sandwich. I'm training your brain like a dog. Like I'm giving it a treat for saying, hey, I did something shitty. Oh, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you for being aware, right? So then the brain is going to start seeking pleasure because the brain is trying to avoid the pain of shame. So that's why we develop blind spots. But if we install the software of self-compassion, and we install the software of self-awareness, or looking at our blind spots, or eating a shit sandwich, it's going to help us when we look at our habits and behaviors, as well as the understanding that it's not your fault. It's not who you are. If you're a bully, if you're a narcissist, if you're cheating and lying and addicted to porn or addicted to alcohol or being mean to your kids, whatever you are, it's not your fault, but it's definitely your problem. And you can definitely fix it. And it takes bravery and evolutionary excellence to look at what's not working in our lives. So again, if we're using that kind of language to ourselves, we're retraining our brain to welcome self-awareness opportunities, because we're not making it mean we're a failure. We're making it mean we're awesome. So then we're finding a healthy way to work with our beloved egos. And training that brain to seek pleasure and not to avoid the pain of discomfort because we make it mean we're not good enough. So that's why I work with people in a very specific order, because I've thought through all of these things for years and decades of failure and wondering why things don't work and why, people's blind spots get bigger or whatever it is. And the other important precondition for this is metacognition, or awareness, or even awareness of awareness, because a lot of times where people sometimes refer to as unconscious or asleep, and those can sound very derogatory, but I do think that they're very effective in some ways. It's like you're the computer, but you're not plugged into the World Wide Web, where you are plugged into the World Wide Web, but you're not aware because you're just stuck in the software and you're missing out on that expanded perspective. Or you don't have enough energy, you don't have a strong enough signal to the World Wide Web, or you're plugged into the wall, but you don't have enough energy getting in to run the vehicle or the computer. So it's also looking at awareness, which we've talked about in a previous episode, and being able to observe those things, become the observer or the writer and director of the movie rather than only the star of the movie. Because you either believe a thought or you question a thought. And if you're not aware of a thought and it's just running and you think that thought is reality, your body, your vehicle of consciousness, the battery, the heart battery, the engine, and the emotional navigation system are going to respond as if that is true. So we want to start looking at like, oh, I just thought this thought or that thought. Is that a helpful thought? Is that a true thought? And starting to be curious about ourselves and curious about what we think and curious about, why did I do that? Why do I behave that way? Why does that person trigger me? What is it that I judge about that person, without judging ourselves or others, or judging the judge, or even in our mind, but just being curious and compassionate and open-minded and training our brain, I guess. And I used to start a slide to sort of clickbait people in a presentation I did, saying your brain is a lazy liar. So it's often said that, like, I've seen different statistics. I don't know which one is accurate. I know for me it was in the higher end when I started this work, but between 70 and 90% of the thoughts we think are just nonsense. There's nonsense thoughts. So it's like, so think about, let's go back to our computer metaphor. They're like pop-ups on your browser, pop-ups, 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 pop-ups. Well, you don't have to click on that pop-up, but it's part of the World Wide Web. So you might get that pop-up because of your algorithm or other people's algorithm. Thoughts are just things. You can either act on them or not. But when we don't know, that that's happening. We're not in awareness. We're in that state of sleepingness or programming, or we're on autopilot, or we're not piloting that vehicle of consciousness, and we're not running that software. Then we believe every pop-up. And that's constantly training our algorithms. And then that computer is the one that is running all of the rest of the systems in our vehicle of consciousness. So again, I'm not about, some people are very, it's all in the mindset. Some people are all in the somatic body. And I think that though we're a multidimensional species, so which one is the cause and which one of the effect is less important than let's hit them at all levels. But they are all impacted by the brain for sure.
And when it comes to some solutions or some tools that men might use to reprogram the software, what are some of the tools you would suggest, or in your experience you have seen that they are working?
So different tools work for different people. So never beat yourself up if something doesn't work for you and it seems to work for everybody else. Partially, other people that say it's working might not be authentic, or might just be afraid to tell people that they are feeling the same way you are, that it's not working. Like, I often have people tell me, like, if I did, like, back in the day, I used to try to do like meditation groups or guided meditations and things, and everyone would be like, that was amazing. And I'd say, really? Because I sat there the whole time and my brain was kicking up a fuss, and it was like, this is stupid. This isn't working. I wonder what everybody else is doing. I wonder if everybody else is meditating better than me. Look at that. I can't even meditate properly, blah, blah, blah. And people are like, you're teaching this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm winning just by observing that that's what my mind is doing. But I want to be authentic with you so that other people don't feel that they're failing. And some people, so meditation can be a great tool for some people. And there's 15, that's not an accurate number. There's a zillion different ways to meditate. So for me, a walking meditation works really well. For some people, guided meditation works really well. For some people, breath work works really well. But all of it requires curiosity and metacognition, which again, metacognition is the ability to zoom out into the observer of your thoughts. And meditation can be very helpful for that. Therapy can be very helpful for some people to reprogram their brains. Creating some discipline in other areas of our life can be very helpful if we don't want our brain, because our brain is just like, give me what I want, give me what I want. It's like a little dopamine addict, and we're dopamining all the time, and we're in a very overstimulated society. So one of the things that could be very helpful is a dopamine detox, or quitting certain food habits. Not just punishing ourselves and pushing ourselves into having to be achieving all the time, but just being like, okay, my brain controls me. And I'll ask anybody who says this, I'm like, okay, if you don't think your brain's in control of you, give up sugar, gluten, dairy, and fat for a week, and salt, and just eat fruits and vegetables for a week and watch people flip out. Or stop watching your favorite show, or give up social media and these 4 foods for a week and watch people flip out. So again, either you train your brain is training you. Doesn't mean we don't get to have the things we like, but one of the ways that we can come into awareness or raise our vibration or whatever is by finding a couple of things in areas of our life where we can train our brain and stop letting it be in control of us. In a compassionate way, we can also fuel our brain correctly. So if you're running on caffeine and adrenaline and pizza, and there's nothing wrong with that, there's no shame. I'm very food addicted. I eat a very clean diet now, but quitting foods were the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, bar none. So I know what it's like to be in that addictive state. I look at people will literally eat themselves to death, or will take a drug or whatever, because the brain is seeking that reward. So quitting certain foods, practicing meditation, just finding one area of your life where you say no to your brain so that it doesn't get to be in charge all the time. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. My brain is maybe a little malfunctioning today because I haven't had enough fruit or glucose or water. Is making sure that the electricity is running well, making sure that it has nutrients, making sure it has water that electricity needs to run well, making sure that, you don't have too many tabs open, and that it's getting its constant what it needs, and it's getting nutrients, and that it's not being exposed to a lot of things that can impact our brain negatively, like chemicals and fragrances, and and Roundup on your lawn, and all of these things that can impact the way that your brain works. So, and then just being really patient and being really curious, sitting down, even if it means 10 minutes a day, just watching your thoughts, and so that you're learning. Or if I have people that I'm doing like a VIP one-to-one intensive with, I will have them set a timer every 15 minutes for a week. And I'm like, do you want to reprogram the software over the next 10, 20 years, or do you want to do it in 2 weeks? Because I can help you reprogram all of it in 2 weeks, but you're going to have to work for it. And just observing what thoughts they're thinking every 15 minutes and just letting it go and just practicing. So practicing metacognition, training the brain to be aware of its thoughts. And that can start with even 10 minutes a day, just being like, oh, I thought this is stupid. I don't know why that stupid podcast host, Sandy, said I should do this. This is never going to work. I'm clearly failing at this. I wonder if I'm going to have a cheeseburger tomorrow. I wonder if I should masturbate later. Oh, I wonder if I forgot to get my dry cleaning. Like, whatever it is, doesn't matter. You're just watching it. And with a sense of humor, like you're watching reality TV show or something, or you're watching pop-ups on your social media. Because again, that computer is connected to the World Wide Web, whether we're super aware of it, like psychics or myself, like people that can enter altered states of consciousness or have spent months in samadhi states like I have, where I'm constantly aware of my connection to the World Wide Web. But everybody's connected to the World Wide Web, and your algorithms are both impacted by what you think and also attracted to more of what you download, right? So if you're typing certain things in your browser day after day after day, what do you get? More of that, more of that, more of that. And the computer or the internet sends all of those things to your browser, yes? Right? All of a sudden it's like, oh, everything about, you probably get a lot of things about self-help and mindset and spirituality and self-help, whatever. You know, somebody who's having a baby would get a lot of things about babies and children, and somebody who's all, you know, I've been buying things for my dog this week. So everything that's popping up in my browser is about dogs, 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 dogs. And it's not only my thoughts about dogs, it's what everybody else thinks about dogs on the planet that are writing articles. So thoughts, again, can be ours from that programming in childhood, or they can just be random thoughts in the World Wide Web that we're downloading and uploading and downloading. And, you know, we're both downloading from it, and we're also contributing to it by uploading what we think. It's like, depending on what frequency you're downloading from a different program in the web. But you have your own programs in the computer. So the computer has its own program. The web has its own programs or areas. And what's going on in your computer, what you're typing into the browser, is going to determine what you're uploading and downloading. So just practicing that awareness of just starting to be curious about your thoughts. Is this just some thought? You know, everybody around you is like, I don't like this political party or whatever. And you're like, I don't like this political party or whatever. Or your brain has been constantly thinking about, you can't afford the home renovations that you want for your house, or whatever it is you're thinking about. Again, it might be something from you, it might be something from your parents, it might be something from the World Wide Web. But starting to be curious about those thoughts and just think, is this thought helpful for me? And should I take action on this thought? And should I spend some time consistently reprogramming some of this software? And so I also have sort of protocols that help people reprogram habits and behaviors very simply. Would you like me to do that very simply? Give like a tool that people can use? So basically, you become aware of something. You don't beat yourself up, because again, you don't want to punish. You just want to go, oh, I'm aware of something that I want to change. It's not about, I'm so bad for not exercising, or I'm so bad. No, we're over the shame. We're in self-compassion. We're not shame collapsing. And if you are, don't shame your shame. It's fine. Just practice more self-compassion and do the shame work. But we observe a software or pattern, a behavior, a habit, a thought pattern in our life that no longer serves us. We celebrate the awareness because we want to train our brain over time to celebrate, to be in awareness. And we're going to give it a little biscuit. Oh, here you go. Oh, okay. And we're training it like a dog. So it's going to celebrate the awareness. So we celebrate ourselves. That helps our self-concept. That helps our self-compassion. Then, before we make these changes, we want to do our parts work, and we want to find any part of us that's in resistance to the change. Because what a lot of people do is they start bulldozing from 0 to hero, But again, if we don't do the parts work, so if we have 10 parts of our personality and 2 parts of them are like, yes, let's start being more self-compassionate and stop eating pizza. But we have other parts, that's bad math, I'm like 7, 6, but we have other parts of us that are like, hey, you are not getting your emotional needs met. The only way I'm getting any dopamine or any pleasure chemicals is through that pizza. And another part of you that's like, wait, what? You want to start being kind to yourself? Hey, I'm your inner critic, buddy. And I'm the one who helps you get things done. You wouldn't be making $1 million without me. So we have these parts of us in resistance. So it's going to take a long time to really force those parts into compliance. Whereas if we can just quickly, and I have systems for that, we just quickly address any resistance so that we at least find collaboration with all of our parts, it's going to just make it so much easier. When we have internal conflict or internal resistance, that's why we kind of go 3 steps forward, 5 steps back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Or we experience what we call self-sabotage. So again, we give all of those parts of us a seat, and you would maybe want to listen to past episodes if this is not making sense to you. We go through all of this. So this is a step a lot of people miss when they're doing mantras or mindset, or they're not tuning into all the different systems, the emotion, the heart, the brain, the fuel. Because again, if we don't have enough energy, if there's no gas in the tank, we can't make any of these changes. Because there's no energy to make changes. And then your energy is going to take the path of least resistance. So all of the systems impact each other. We're multidimensional beings. So we, again, celebrate the awareness. Yay. Find any resistance. Handle the resistance in a loving, compassionate way. Get at least those parts of us slightly on board. Then make a conscious choice to do it differently over and over and over. As many failures as it takes, celebrating every failure as evidence of effort and bravery until that becomes your new subconscious baseline, neural pathway, and perceptual filter or habit. And again, that's another time when our metaphor of the bicep can come in and we start to feel really uncomfortable because we're pushing our brain into new thinking patterns and our parts are getting activated and they want us to go back to safety. That's when we can look at, is this discomfort, is my brain trying to avoid the discomfort of growth? And does it have enough energy? Is there enough electricity for it to make this, to make these changes? Or do I need to fill up my fuel tank before I start, before I start driving down a new path? Or, or is there enough energy in the battery? Am I practicing that self-compassion enough?
Yeah. I feel like this is really helpful even to get some steps to follow or get clarity on steps that can be taken. And with this, is there anything else that you want to add before we close off this super packed episode as usual?
Yeah, for people listening, remember that different ways of thinking require a lot of energy and they're creating new neural pathways. So repetition works. So I would invite you to listen to some of these podcast episodes more than once. It's a very passive way to just get the information into your subconscious and trust you can tell it to work while you're sleeping. Hey, I'd like this to just, just sort it out. Just expose yourself to it over and over and over again. Think of a song you hear on the radio. Even if you don't like the song, if you hear the song over and over and over, eventually you're like, blah, blah, blah. And you can say all the lyrics and lyrics get stuck in your head and then you start repeating them and repeating them and repeating them. Repetition works. Repetition is the language of the subconscious. So again, the thoughts you think over and over and over become beliefs, become perceptual filters. Your brain will find evidence of what it believes. The other thing is remember that it requires energy to make changes. So we need to be practicing self-compassion and getting enough sleep and eating in ways that are serving and drinking water and whatever is going to work well for us. Everybody is a bit different. So bodies have different needs. I don't know the needs of everybody's body. And just remembering that it's not who you are. Be curious, practice awareness, train your brain. Your brain wants to, actually, I'll share a story that really drives this home for people. I used to volunteer at a place for very troubled youths that had experienced a lot of trauma and abuse. Some of them had been in the sex trade industry, or had been experiencing addiction or experiencing abuse. And some of them had to be restrained or have somebody assigned to them all the time. And there was somebody there, I did mentoring with various people there, and there was one particular person that had experienced just unimaginable trauma that I wouldn't even want to repeat here. And being loved by me felt so unfamiliar to the brain. And after a year of sobriety and a year of working together and working with their psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, caseworkers, group home, everything, we had decided that it would be wonderful for this person to come and live with me. But being loved felt so unfamiliar that the day this was supposed to happen, they jumped on a bus, went downtown, went back to the drugs that had been forced on them at 13 years old, and went back to the pimp that abused and beat them for years, because that felt familiar. And the brain thinks what is familiar is safety. And that's a very extreme story. And it's not a sob story. It's not, I share it because I had nothing but compassion for that person. And I thought, this is how much we need to train our brains. Because our body, our brain, our nervous system, they're all a part of, we have a brain, and that's the other thing too, is we have a brain in our heart, we have a brain in our gut, we don't only have a brain in our head. I'm just using simplified metaphors. So also, if our gut can't produce serotonin because we've been eating a lot of food, or we've had antibiotics, or our gut biome is impacted, then that can impact our mood and our brain. So, I mean, there are other layers to this, but I am trying to simplify things. But either you train your brain or your brain is training you. And your brain doesn't mean any harm. It's not sabotaging you. It's just like a computer, and it's just running familiar software. And you are the electricity, or your soul is the one that should be programming it. And you can program it, and you can become the writer and the director and the producer of your own mind movie. But if you're not doing that, you're probably playing a character in a role that wouldn't be the most fun for your journey.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the brain. And as usual, if you have any questions, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can comment them below. And there's always a link in anywhere you're listening where you can also click on that and submit any questions for Sandy, so that we can go through them, address them, or who knows, maybe even create an episode about it,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and also, if you want any support with this, Sandy has given opportunity for any of you to book a call with her. So I personally highly recommend it, and I keep saying it in every episode probably. But that's the truth. It's really helpful. Even like 1 hour with Sandy, it can have huge impact. And anything else you want to add apart from?
Yeah, just please feel free to, as Austra said, please feel free to comment, ask questions, share your experiences. That's helpful too. And if anybody wants to explore working together, I don't have a lot of spots available, and sometimes we are on a waiting list, but please reach out. In 1 hour, we can get a lot of clarity on your unique magnetic masculinity blueprint, and assess whether we would like to work together, or whether you would like to find other avenues to work on that. But I do highly recommend to sit and have a conversation, and we'll see what comes out of it.
Yeah. And next week, we're talking about the battery, which is the heart.
Right. Another brain. But yes, in our vehicle of consciousness metaphor, the heart is the battery. And a lot of men have not been given the tools. And men all over the world, I've had CEOs, PhDs, millionaires, geniuses, entrepreneurs tell me that deep down they feel not good enough. They don't have their needs met. They want to be held and told everything's going to be okay. They feel like something is missing and they don't know what it is. They don't know how to communicate their wants and needs to their partner, and they don't know how to get that heart and that emotional navigation system back online. And doing so is going to maybe sometimes feel uncomfortable, but it's going to just open up so much expansion. You're going to up level like crazy, and you're finally going to be able to experience fun, fulfilling relationships with yourself and others.
Yeah, I love it. So we will see you next week.
Okay, thank you. Bye for now.